Well, do you have any questions? Any comments about anything? Elijah?
Yesterday we spent a lot of time kind of talking about how people will be, I guess. But not a lot of time.
Okay.
But that's like kind of what I got out of it. And there were a couple of questions about like if the world is so evil and the world is so evil, why should we keep opening it? My question for you is your hope in the world teaching this class?
My first 6 marriages, they revolved around hopes and fantasies. Are we going to move to Florida, hold hands, and have sex every night? None of them turned out the way I desired them to. And I think I went into these relationships creating the wrong story, you know. And then as I got a little older, as I began to move slower, as I began to feel that my body is betraying me, I asked myself, what sort of relationship do I want now? You know, as you age, of course, your sex drive kind of diminishes a little. Your desire to party, to have conversation, that also diminish. And you realize you pay more visits to Kaiser than anywhere else. So you begin to look at your companions, or at least the people you want in your life, very, very closely and politically. You know, just in case I get sick, is she going to drive me to Kaiser? Just in case I get sick, if she's going to bring me a cup of water? You know, it wasn't so much about romance. It wasn't so much about traveling here and there. I came to realize certain truths and realities about my position in life. Now, the only thing I could hope for at that point was that hopefully, if I can meet someone who's able to take care of me in old age, I'll be somewhat lucky. Okay. And what you realize is that you can actually have hope in stories that will never turn out to be true because that's not part of life, you know. Or you could have hope in probabilities that if I find a woman in her 20s, if I was to go out with her, the truth is after a while she'll get bored and she'll leave me. If on the other hand, I was to find someone unattractive, lonely and miserable, and I said, marry me, she would say yes, and there's a good chance that she won't leave me because she is old and smelly and unattractive. Okay. Now, when you talk about classes, what you're really referring to is people's ability to learn. Okay. Now, if you look at human history for the past many, many thousands of years, the story has been very, very simple, going back all the way to our first hero, which we'll talk about hopefully in this class tonight, maybe Gilgamesh. You know, he had a life very much like yours and mine. Eventually came to realize that life is not going to go very far. So he changed his direction. He went on the spiritual quest, whatever that may mean for us right now. And then he comes to certain conclusions. He comes back to civilization in hopes of telling people a few things about what he's learned from his journey. No one listens. So he writes his stories on a wall. That's all. Hello. Karl Marx, the great 19th century prophet. He was a young romantic philosopher. Kind of like you and I, he believed that eventually life is going to take us somewhere really, really nice because that's what history does. You know, one empire collapses, another is created, and hopefully the new will learn from the old and will create a political system that will benefit everyone. So he created some unions. He advertised those unions to people, hoping that everyone would come together, form solidarity. It didn't happen. Karl Marx was expelled from 4 countries. Malcolm X, what exactly did he want? Very simple stuff. And what you realize is, first, change is difficult. Second, listening to someone who goes against your habits, the way you live your life. We have a tendency of shutting down because it's just far too challenging. Okay. Now, given that I've been in this stage for about 30 some odd years, and I wasn't this way all the time. Until just a couple of years ago, I would collect money from students, go to Costco on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, make sandwiches for about 400 or 500 students. For the past 30 years of teaching, I've had students over my house constantly. Okay. But as you age, you begin to learn things. It's something that you miss when you're younger. Because when you're young, again, your mind is clouded by hopes and fantasies. And there is nothing wrong with it. I think when you're young, you're just condemned to be hopeful. And when you're older, you're condemned to live with certain realities. And that's just the way things are. And so what you have in society at any time in history is that you're dealing with, I think, 2 positions, 2 hierarchies, 2 levels of understanding in society. You have the young folks who look at the old folks and they are disgusted. I mean, some of you may look at me and say, man, I just don't want to be an instructor like him. He is boring, he is rude, he is disgusting. That's great. That's how young people view old people. Okay. And that's the right of every young person to look at what adults have created and then demonize the adults because what they've created just smells bad. And then you get to be older. And as you get older, you become a bit more conservative. And by that, I mean the following. When you're 18 and you go out on dates, you ask all sorts of silly questions. Where do you go to a party? What music do you listen to? The stupid questions that 18-year-olds ask, and there's nothing wrong with it. You're liberal with your questions, and you're open with possibilities. When you get a little older, which means that you've dated a few times, you've been broken a few times, now you go on with pointed questions because you know that the old questions didn't work out for you too well. Now you say, well, do you have a job? Did you go to school? Did you graduate? Did you buy a house? By the way, how's your mom? I mean, these are key questions you ask because now you're looking for a car, i.e. a human being, that can take you all the way from here to Los Angeles without breaking down. Because that's not what you want to do when you get old. You don't want to have a car that breaks down every 5 minutes. And human beings are like that. When you're young, you can go out with people who break down all the time because you have the stamina to, fix them, to tolerate their nonsense. When you get a little older, you're diminished in so many different ways. So this idea of injustice, this idea of utopia, that somehow you want to create this society where there is fairness and justice and equality, it's never going to happen because we all stand on different platforms. We all have different experiences. So do I come to this class hopeful? No. I mean, I like these ideas. Am I going to walk away saying, okay, tonight I think a few people learned a few things? No, that's not the way things work. As I said, you can get excited. You can get inspired. The wheels in your brain will begin to move a little bit. You will go home, reflect. You will go home, have a conversation with your companion about some of the things we've talked about in this class. But are this stuff going to make drastic changes to your life? No. It can't. It won't. Now, some of you may say, Amir, why don't you change the way you teach? I am addicted to this way of teaching. I can't change. I may be able to make minor adjustments here and there, but that's all I can do. Change is really, really, really tough. Really tough. Assalamu alaikum. How is Muhammad? Anyone else? Matt?
Pouring mugs.
Well, you know, I take my mugs home to wash. I wash them. I forget to bring them back to school. So
Gift or buy it out.
I stole it from my sister. Well, yeah. Yeah. When I go to Roseville, I return kind of late at night. And she says, Amir, let me make you a cup of coffee. Otherwise, you're going to crash on the road. I said, yeah, make me a coffee. I want that cup of it. She said, okay. So anyone else with anything before we go home? No one? No? 17, right? That's right. Okay. Well, I have nothing to say. Should we continue with our conversation from last night, or should we change direction and just move to Gilgamesh? It's up to you guys. Maybe I can just say a couple of things, and then we'll move to Gilgamesh.
I missed the first night, so I didn't get your answer.
The first night, we just went around, got to know people, to see whether or not anyone is dateable. You know, you could take them out for a cup of coffee, spend some money on them, get lucky. Rochelle?
Hi.
Hi.
So I thought about a lot of things that, like, you've been speaking about in class, about like hopelessness.
Let me, before you finish, let me just say one thing. I should have said this the first night. Look, this is my job. This is what I have been doing for the past 3 decades. Okay? Do not take this stuff home. You're here for a grade. Really, you signed up for this class and not to start thinking about ridiculous things. You signed up for this class, and even though you may take some of the stuff home, it doesn't mean that anything is going to happen. But for those of you who may be in the wrong time, in other words, you know how sometimes something just goes inside you and refuses to leave? Like your mom has always told you not to smoke, but it's always gone over your head, but this time she tells it to you and just sticks to you, and you really don't want to smoke, and you decide not to smoke, but you look at your cell phone and all the contact people are smokers, and then you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to delete all of their numbers and all of their names, and then you realize you have no friends. Now you're lonely, now you're sad, now you're miserable. Wrong time, wrong place. Okay? So in as much as I don't believe that ideas can, at least for us, this day and age, can do much damage, but for those of you who may, once in a while, take these ideas home, play with them a little bit, create some friction within as well as without, with your companions, with your friends, with your parents, my recommendation is do not forget your initial reason for signing up for this class. You need 3 units. You want to up your salary. You want to go to a 4-year school. You want to prosper in life. That's your reason for enrolling. So, yeah. Having said that, go ahead.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, because I was like, yeah, all this hopelessness and, people are evil and this and that. Yes, they are. But I've realized that just growing as a person and as an individual, that, despite the way sometimes people may treat me and how fucked up their lives are, they're just projecting. And so I realized that I don't want to change just because someone else is fucked up and the way they treat me doesn't mean that I have to project on them or treat them a certain way. I can move around them. And so, with that being said, I was just like, dang, people people can be very nasty, and specifically the Bay Area, because I've lived here almost all my life. I've also traveled to different places, and I feel like I have a lot of optimism in me, not on me. So I'm a hard worker, but I also work smart. And so I feel like some of the things that you say are like, they're filled with truth, but also experience and wisdom. And so I'm just like, yeah, I like the way I'm going to do that, despite how weird, awkward, strange, ugly people are, the way their childhood may be good or bad, because a lot of people do project. And you know, during these times right now, a lot of things are challenging for people, whether we want to accept it or not.
So I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me do so for a moment. I'm a little older. I may just collapse at any time. One of the most important things that all of us in this class want in life is power. And the more power you have, the better your gated community can be. Okay? If you have children and you have money, you will send them to private school. That's a gated community, because you've come to realize that public schools may contaminate your kids beyond repair. Okay? If you have learned a few things about relationships, next time you go out, you will begin to ask different set of questions.
Right.
So the point is, the more power you have, whether it's physical power, emotional power, where you can stand all the nonsense that life gives you, and you won't break because you understand a few things about the coming and going out of emotions, the way life delivers events and imposes and burdens all of us. The more intellectual power you have, again, power is the only thing that you want in life. And if I was to give it to you in, say, a Christian sense, I would say to you this way. Not to care for money, that's a lot of power. Not to care for a relationship, that's a lot of power. Not to care for learning, book learning, filling your head with information, that's a lot of power. Having a lot of spiritual prowess components inside, that's a lot of power. And that's who Jesus is. Because he has a lot of power, he can dismiss most of us. He's not interested in us. So we don't have the power to contaminate him. The less power you have, the more needy you are. Consider going home tonight and looking at your fridge, looking into your fridge. While you may be hungry, if your fridge is empty, you will have desperate need for Safeway, for Costco, for 7-Eleven, for someone to bring you food. If on the other hand, your fridge is full, you also know how to cook, you have no need for anyone or anything. Okay? That's all you want, power. It's not about other people. Now, I don't like you. In 6 weeks, it'll be finished. I won't see you. That's power. If on the other hand, we were in a relationship, emotional relationship, and there was like serious attachments, and then you were abusive, then I don't have the power to just leave as easily. It may take me 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Hello, how are you? Are you well? Oh. Are you teaching this summer? Okay, good. Dianza? Oh, both, okay, good. Said is good? Said is her husband. I mean, you guys don't need to know those things. They're private information. Vaughn, you have any questions before we move on? Are you sure? Okay. Kendra, hello. How are you? Are you well? Mom is good? You're teaching this summer, no? Okay. There is Ginning, by the way. Okay. We'll talk about 3 or 4 figures that have made up what we call modernity to some extent. And then we'll move to Gilgamesh. There is a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. He is German. And some people have suggested that he was gay. I don't really know. Maybe he was. If he was really a tortured soul, because you're talking about a man being born at a time where such things are just not permitted and accepted. Nietzsche was an introvert, which means that anything that goes inside him, he feels, and he feels them deeply. There are a couple of tragedies in his life. Number one, he runs into this young woman, asks her on a date. She says yes. On the second night, he proposes marriage. She says no. And he becomes really, really sad and depressed. Time passes. He runs into another young woman, asks her out on a date. First night, he proposes marriage. She says no. And both of these young women go away marrying his friends. Tragically, for someone like Nietzsche or someone like some of you in this class, you may wake up one morning in your bed and you say to yourself, today I want to do something that's meaningful. Maybe I want to go to church and pray. Maybe I want to call my friends and have a meaningful conversation. Maybe I want to go out and just date and have a meaningful date. And every door you knock on and every door that opens, you realize, yes, you can do all those things, but there is no meaning that can be found. Something about you is restless. You keep praying to something, to life, to bring down some meaning into your life, but nothing can be found. And Nietzsche becomes really, really, really angry at people and really, really angry at the culture. As I mentioned to you last night, I have no idea who you guys are, but imagine that you get to be 5 or 6 years of age and you've had a really, really difficult time. Your father has been an addict, your mom has never been around, and you had to take care of yourself for most of your short life, which is only 5 years. And one night while you're in a fetal position and you're just crying and screaming, you say, why was I born if there is no one who's willing to take care of me? Why am I here? This is too much. Now, what is lucky for Nietzsche is that he has the eloquence of speech, and he has the eloquence and the craftiness and the creativity to write. And he writes really, really well. And he writes all these nasty things about what it means to be human and what it means to live in society that demeans us, corrupts us, contaminates us. Nietzsche is like this kid who wakes up and screams for God, but God can't be found. Screams for meaning, but meaning can be found. Screams for purpose, but purpose can't be found. So you know what he does? He does what you and I do. He journals. So, in one of his books, which I think is called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Zarathustra is a tradition we'll talk about hopefully in this class, is a Persian prophet. And there's a story in it, it's called The Madman. Now, because Nietzsche was very fond of the Greek culture, Greek narratives or mythologies, no doubt he borrowed the story from the story of Diogenes. And the story of Diogenes, I think Monique isn't here, but if she was, she'd probably be happy to hear the story, which is the following. Diogenes is this dark, gloomy philosopher some 2,000 years ago. He wakes up at 6 in the morning, walks to Lakeshore around 9 or 10 in the morning with a flashlight or a lantern or a lit candle. Now think for a moment. The sun is out. There are no clouds. Everybody's walking. Everybody's laughing. Diogenes is not blind. He can see things. And yet he has a lit lantern. And people ask him, well, you know, the sun is out. There is light outside. You can turn off your lantern. He says, no. I am here to look for a just human being. A human being who understands. A human being who knows how to live, how to think, how to speak. Because if you really, really want to know what comedy is people who speak without knowing and understanding anything. Sit back, listen to them, and you will realize they just ramble on and on and on and on. And what could be funnier than that? I have no doubt some of you in this class have encountered, you know, your nieces and nephews, these like 10, 18, 20-year-old punks, and you happen to be like a few years older than they are, you've been around the block a few times, and they look at you and say, well, let me tell you what love is. And you try to reason with them, you know, I've been in love like 5 times. Maybe I should tell you. No, you don't really understand. Let me tell it to you. And then they open their mouth. And you don't know if you should slap them, you should vomit, you should run away, what you should do. So here's a madman in Nietzsche's story. He's running around with a lit lantern. And all of a sudden people begin to circle him. What are you doing here? Why are you screaming? What are you looking for? Who have you lost? Why do you walk around with a lit lantern? What is wrong with you? I'm looking for God. Why would anyone look for God? You look for God because you're looking for your soul. You look for God because you look to belong to something that's greater than life. You're looking for God because you're looking for meaning, for purpose, for identity. That should you die, on the other side there is God waiting for you. You're looking for God because you want to know good from bad, right from wrong. You're looking for God because you want to know how to live. If there is a soul inside you, you want God to guide you towards that direction. Maybe your life is just filled with pain, and you're looking for God because you want to cry and scream, because you want God to hold you, to give you some comfort and solace. Next time you go on a dating app, why do you do so? You love your parents, it's just not enough. You love your siblings, it's not enough. You have money, it's not enough. You go on a dating app because deep down you are lonely. 8 billion people on this planet and you are lonely. You can just open your front door, walk around the lake, thousands of people coming and going, and yet you still feel lonely. That's Friedrich Nietzsche. A man who is born in a time where the culture can't give him anything. The only difference between someone like Nietzsche and myself is that when I go out there to look for meaning but can't find any, I get depressed. I stay in my room, lock the door, don't answer to my wife or my kids. And I don't have the talent to write. And I don't have the eloquence of speech. So I just sit in my room. And I'm in mourning. It seems as if my life has turned into a cemetery. And I am grieving the loss of something I don't know. As the madman begins to look at all the people around him and saying to them, I have lost God and I'm looking for God. Can someone please tell me where he is? He comes to realize something really interesting. هر کسی از ظن خود شد یار من و از درون من نجز اسرار من. There was a painter, Norwegian, by the name of Edward the Monk. He has, most of his paintings are really the same, but this particular one called The Scream. You're walking on this bridge. There are some people behind you. There are some people in front of you. You're the only one who's single. And you're the only one who's not smiling. In fact, your mouth is open. And in fact, you're screaming. Why does anyone scream? Because they're in pain. And what exactly is it that you and I want when we are in pain? You want to be held. You want to be listened to. So what you have in this painting is that this man screams, but people just laugh. No one cares. That's one of the things you need to understand about pain. And this is like one of those universal truths. It doesn't matter what age you're born into, what time in history. Whenever pain comes to you, and whenever you try to express your pain to another, you need to understand the person who's hearing you will never understand you. Understanding has to do with intellect. Pain lives inside your soul. What you want is you want to break bread emotionally, but your companion isn't there with you. Your companion is healthy. Your companion is good. His life is fine. You're the one who's broken. And this is what Nietzsche talks about. The man who's looking for a purpose screams for help, but no one can help him because no one feels the way he does. No one thinks the way he does. And that's one of the lessons that you and I need to learn. If life has broken you, find the proper tools to keep the brokenness inside you. Play music with it. Dance with it. Cry with it. Run with it. Go to the ring and box with it. It matters very little what you want to do. Try not to share your pain with another. Because they won't understand you. Eventually it'll turn into gossip. And then you feel betrayed. A few weeks ago, there was a group of people who showed this movie about the events that are taking place in Palestine. So my wife and I went and watched this movie for a couple of hours. It was a documentary. And so the guy who was running the show said, well, when the movie's over, let's have a round table. We'll all sit together and we'll talk a little bit. I says, okay. So the movie's done, we're all sitting and everybody begins to like say things, you know. We're sitting in a circle, so person number one begins to talk and they ramble on for about 10 minutes. And person number two rambles on for 15 minutes. As I'm sitting back and listening and saying, well, none of these folks are Palestinians or Middle Easterners. I understand that sometimes you want to raise your fist or raise your voice and say a couple of things about racism or about injustice of this and injustice of that. Why would you want to do it? If your belly is full, if you have no concerns, it doesn't mean that what you witness doesn't create pain inside you. But I think the more mature response is just to keep your mouth shut out of respect for people who are actually suffering. So if you want to make sure that the pain that lives inside you is not defiled, okay? Try if you can to find the tools to keep the stuff within you. People will trash it. Yes, Vonnet, is it?
Or just more about this representation. What do you think about like that? Like, I don't know if you're saying that. What about people who might not have you?
I think it's great. When New Orleans happened, I had a lot of friends from Roseville who are very, very well off, rich. Got on a plane, went over there, they're white, went over there and helped a lot of African Americans. They felt good about themselves, you know, even though they were looked upon as outsiders. Nevertheless, they did some good, you know. You know, what I find interesting is there is something about cultures that have some depth and age to them. Many countries in Africa, many countries in the Middle East, many countries in the Asian world. And the truth is, when life offers them some very bad hands, you don't find them getting depressed and you don't find them seeking therapy because it doesn't exist. Somehow the culture just teaches them to hold themselves together as best as they possibly can. In a place such as New Guinea, for example, the moment you express anger, you become an outcast. You can be 70, you can be 80, you can be 2, it doesn't really matter. An elder looks at you and says, just get out, go to the corner and it's time out for you. You have no right to speak about your issues in a public arena. You know, is it good that you can stand up for the poor and for those who are downtrodden? Absolutely. The point of the conversation was that just in case life breaks you, try to find the proper tools to deal with your brokenness on your own by yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't have friends with whom you can kind of converse once in a while. But ultimately, this is the card that you have been dealt with, and it's something you have to deal with. That's all. So, coming to realize that no one has the capacity or the ability or even the interest or the care to listen to his pain. In fact, they begin to joke around with him. Let us tell you where God has gone. Maybe he's playing hide and seek with you. Maybe he's just around the corner. Sometimes you go home and you look kind of sad and depressed. Your mom asks you, what the hell is going on with you? You say nothing. You just don't want to burden your mom. And you're just tired of expressing the pain inside you. You go to your room, you lock the door, you turn off the lights and you cry. Your mom knocks on the door and says, honey, is everything okay? And then she tries to give you advice. And you resent her for giving you advice. Advice is like a bumper sticker. It does nothing for you. You want to be left alone. And that's the other thing that Nietzsche tells us in the story. That every time you try to express your pain to another, they want to give you a bumper sticker. That's irrelevant, useless. After a while, he looks at these people and says to them, it seems I have come far too early. People need time to mature. Even thunder and storm needs time to reach the ears of men. Some of you in this class have no doubt have taken a date home, so you could show him or her off to your parents, and your mom comes to you and says, honey, this is the wrong person for you. Don't be stupid. And you look at your mom or your dad or both of them and say, Mom, Dad, you guys don't really understand. I understand, you guys don't. And if your parents have any wisdom, after you have completely frustrated them, they walk away and they say, okay, honey, remember, we have an open door policy. When you're broken, when you're hurt, just knock on this door and you're more than welcome to come back home. It's okay. Wisdom will always demand that people need time to mature so they can begin to hear the messages in wisdom. Always. And oftentimes in painful ways.
Wisdom will always demand what?
It needs time to reach you.
Time to, I didn't hear the last part. Time to heal.
My mom, when I was 20, she would always slap me. Maybe I should say my girlfriend. She always slapped me in a nice, fun way. And she would always tell me, one day you will understand. Well, it took 50 years. Point is, you need time to understand things properly. Eventually, Nietzsche throws down this lantern, walks into a church, and sings the Mass for the dead. I have come far too early for these people. I'm going to go away, and I'm going to write. And in the 21st century, some poor chap will pick up this book from Barnes and Nobles, we'll take it home, we'll read a few chapters, and then we'll understand. That's 300 years after. And I say this story for one simple reason. You and I have come to an age where, despite our desperate desire to find meaning, to find companionship, to find profundity, to find religion, to find soul, there's a good chance that you won't be able to find it. And just in case you run into a Messiah, a teacher, someone who can help you, you're not ready for the help. You're ready to be excited. You're ready to be inspired. But you're not ready for transformation. And that person will eventually leave you with a message. In about 20 years you will understand, but not yet. The next fellow who entered the human scene is named Karl Marx. Like most young people, he's a romantic. He likes hippie philosophy. Mother Teresa, for those of you in this class who have heard of that particular name, she used to be this German, tiny little woman at the age of 15, quite hot when she was young. As she got older, she became less hot, she became warm, and then quite unattractive later on. But at the age of 15, despite her privilege, she walks to India, and there is something about India she falls in love with. We don't know what it is. And she writes many, many letters to the Pope saying that, build me a house here. Let me live amongst the poor. Let me live amongst the needy. Let me help them. I don't want to come back to Germany. I don't want to come back to Rome. I want to stay here in India. Marx had a relatively fun life early on in life. You know, he hung out with young Hegelians, all these dreamers, think that eventually life is going to take them to paradise. But you're talking about the 18th century, you're talking about the age of terminators, the age of factories, the age of machines. I was 18. I had tons of friends. Then one day my parents called me and they say, Amir, my mom and I, your mom and I, and your sister, we've decided to come and stay in America. And you guys can live with us. And we'll buy a business. I said, really? Why would you guys want to do that? Stay home. Stay in Iran. Enjoy your families. No, you're our children. We miss you guys. My brother and I didn't want my parents to come here because we knew it's going to be torture. We have to go back to school, responsibilities, obligations, yes and no's. Family demands. They come here. 6 months later, they buy a car wash. Every morning for the next 17 years, from 6 in the morning until 7 at night, we wash cars. Myself, my brother, my mom, and my dad. I hated the family business. I had no time for fun. I had no time for my friends. I had no time to read. I had no time to do anything. Then I got to be 45 and 50. Then I was able to go back in time and review my life. And I realized something really interesting. Working shoulder to shoulder with my parents made our relationship rock solid. I will do anything for them. Before the coming of factories, the big machines, you need to understand, you wake up, you go into the field. Tens, if not hundreds of you. You talk to one another while you're plowing the ground. You eat lunch together. You take a nap together. You wake up together. You play with the land again. Then you go home. Nobody feels lonely. You take a shower. You take your family. You take them to town. And you meet people you've been working with all day long. No one's depressed. Everybody breaks bread physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Everybody feels connected. But factories are not going to be made in tiny little cities or villages. You bring one factory in a village, it turns into a town, then it turns into a city, then it turns into a country. It's huge. You and I live in Oakland. It's a zoo. How many friendships can you really create in a life that moves so fast? All of us in this class work. We are put in a cubicle. The only given what? A 30-minute lunch break? You know how human relationships are built, right? They're built on wasting a lot of time with another human being. You sit and you talk gibberish. And you begin to be attached to the way they look, the way they smell, the way they talk. That's how you build friendships. And it happened organically for all of us. What happens in Marx's time is that these huge factories are built. And what exactly is it that you and I need? We need money. You need money to buy bread, to buy milk, to buy meat. But farms are dead. Villages are dead. You have to move to New York. No one has got time to stop and talk to you. Everybody's rushing. And what do you give to earn a buck? You give your life away. So this is what Marx began to observe. 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds leave their house at 4 a.m. They stand by a conveyor belt for 10, 15, 16, 17 hours. They come home dead. How much do they get paid? Pennies. Those who work don't get rich. Those who own the factories get rich. Now what you have for the first time, you have human beings. If you've watched the movie The Matrix, for those of you who are old enough, came out in the 1999 or year 2000, okay? Ultimately, what Marx argued, very much like what Morpheus told Neo, is that human beings are reduced to a Duracell battery. In the Middle East, when a teacher walks into a classroom, all the students stand. In India, in Middle East, in many parts of Africa, a teacher becomes symbolic for the house of wisdom. There are specific etiquettes that students need to follow. But that's not the way this place works. We use people. We exploit people. And that was the message of Karl Marx. No one is a human being anymore. All of us are a prostitute to a system that we can't see, that we can't touch, we can't change. We are used from the moment we are awake or born to the time that we die. And we have zero power to make any changes. Henry Ford, before he went into car business, he had this factory where toasters are made. There came a point he came to realize that he just made too many toasters. And Walmart and Costco refuse to carry anymore because they have tons. And a lot of people have just bought them. So he sits back and says, who doesn't have toasters? I have 1,000 people working for me. They don't have toasters. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to blitz them, advertise the benefits of having a toaster in-house. And just in case they say they don't have money, I'll create the system called loan. I'll loan them the money. And just in case they can't afford, I'll say, why don't you work an extra 5 hours? And Marx argued this beautiful thing about capitalism. There was a time where people could only use your body. But as Malcolm X would say, you're a field slave, not a house slave. A house slave imagines that capitalism is his friend. A house slave is willing to give his life for this system. A house slave has forgotten who he is. A house slave doesn't remember his history. A house slave doesn't remember the heritage. A house slave doesn't remember that the soul of God lives inside him. But the field slave, Malcolm X argued, that's a very, very, very different animal. He works for the company, but always remembers who he is. What capitalism did for us is the following. Not only does it occupy our physical life, it also occupies our emotional, our intellectual, and our spiritual lives. There is no space you can walk into where capitalism does not exist. It's impossible. You don't fall in love. The system pushes you into loneliness and depression, and you seek another human being as your Messiah, but that's only temporary. Now, Marx, of course, was hopeful, imagining that eventually people will wake up, they will rise up, and they will demolish this capitalistic system. But Marx didn't really understand human nature too well. And Marx didn't really understand the cunningness of the system he was writing about. There is, and then there is, and then there is, and then there is people you don't care for. Thank you.
So you still got 7 wives?
I'm sorry?
So do you still have 7 wives? Or you just have 1?
The word wife in German, it means the bringer of sorrow. Sorrow, like sadness.
No, it was yes or no.
Sorrow. When you speak about wives, forgive my digression, she just brings all the awful things about me.
Don't make me do it to you.
There is the masculine and then there is the feminine. The masculine is active. the feminine is passive. In general, men in general, they don't like women who are not so passive.
Is that right?
Good, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Ask any man, they'll tell you. I mean, they'll tolerate you, but after a while, they'll just leave you. If not physically, certainly emotionally. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be active. You should be, because times have changed. But I was really mostly speaking philosophically. But when we get to Gilgamesh, we'll talk about passive and active in a slightly different way. The next is, do you have any questions or comments before we... No? This is so boring. Let me just say one last thing about Karl Marx. He actually he collected a lot of money, and he did buy a lot of guns, and he did pass out those guns, because ultimately he came to realize that Jesus is wrong. If you keep turning the other cheek, your face will fall off. You have to rise up and you have to fight the system that crushes you on a daily basis. His daughter, Jenny, died. Then his wife, Jenny, died. And then 2 months later, he died. But when his daughter died, and they had no medicine and they had no money, and he couldn't take her to the hospital, he said, my daughter is a lamb of God, so to speak. It's a sacrifice that I have made for my people. Capitalism is such a cruel beast, it has killed my daughter. Next is Sigmund Freud. Freud lived to see World War I. He lived to see part of the Nazi movement. Freud is one of those prophets of the 20th century that you can't easily dismiss. Any in this class have heard of Magnus Carlsen? He's a chess player. I'm sorry? Oh, they win and they lose, but Magnus has been world number one for the past like 7-8 years. Yeah, he's like the Jesus Christ of the chess world. When he was 4, he began playing chess about 7-8 hours a day. He's like a Beethoven. Sigmund Freud, when he was maybe 5 or 6 or 7, his brother Michael was born. For those of you in this class who are firstborn and you have a sibling, if you pay close attention, you realize something really, really interesting. The firstborn, they get so much attention. They get so much love. Their parents burden them with so much hope, so many dreams. They're brand new parents. And your parents give you 110% of their attention. Once in a while, the parents look at this kid and they say, life is a long journey. maybe we should give our kid a brother or a sister. And so they lock themselves in the bedroom, they have sex. A couple minutes later, a child comes out. Now the firstborn begins to cry. Milk, bicycle, clothes, TV, can you wipe my butt? But the parents don't respond because they're busy taking care of this other kid. And the firstborn, without really knowing, has this sense of resentment. For the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I scream and my parents run to me. Now, I scream for 10 hours. I feel abandoned. Where are my parents? Why do they love him more than me? So you know what Freud does? He sits and he prays. Not prays to save his soul, but prays so that God can be the cause of his brother's death, Michael. And lo and behold, his tiny little brother gets sick and dies. And that haunts him for the rest of his life. Because he believes he and his prayer was the cause of his brother's death. And from the age of 7 or 8, kind of like Magnus Carlsen, he says, you know what? I want to understand what makes human beings human beings. Why do they have all these emotions inside them? Why they're so angry? What is wrong with them? Why do they become addicted to things? Why they're so miserable? Why can't they overcome their misery? Now, Karl Marx had believed that it's the powerful people who make our lives miserable. But that's not true. Karl is wrong. Some of you in this class have been in perfectly good and healthy relationships. But something about your organism tells you it's not enough. Your job is fine. You're making money. But something about you, it just says it's not enough. Greed. It's not about capitalism. Greed is part of what it means to be human. Lust. It's something that you and I are born with. We are divided animals unto ourselves. We don't need Trump to divide us. We are divided, period. For the past maybe 1800 years, religion had the power to tame the beast that lives inside us. But World War I told us what? There is no decency in human beings. People don't care. Cultures don't care. It's always about the American interest. I don't care who lives in Africa. But if what they're doing does not serve the American interest, we will demolish them. But what about justice? What about human rights? Fuck all of that. So Freud comes forth and says, look, there are two parts to us. A part that has zero patience, a part that is like a 2-year-old infant, screams and cries all the time, seeks pleasure, the cheapest, the cheesiest of kinds. This part will lie, will cheat, will deceive, will do all sorts of things to get what it wants. It knows no bounds. It seeks power, and it wants to exercise its power and dominance all the time. Have you guys seen what has happened to Palestine? Do you know what Palestine was and what it is? Power. Racism is an act without reflection. Because to think is to think about justice, think about fairness, think about equality. And this part that Freud talked about, he calls it the id. Doesn't want to think, doesn't want to reflect. If it wants something, it will do whatever it possibly can to get it at any cost. There is this other part to us, which he calls the superego. It's this part that once in a while stands up and says, do you really need this? Do you really just want to go out with this person just to have sex with them and then toss them? Is that really what you want to do? Do you really need more money? Why don't you grow up a little bit? Now, one of the nice things about the superego is that it is the thing that creates shame in us, guilt in us. It's the way you and I repent. We weep after having made a transgression of sorts. The infantile part of us doesn't give a shit about anything. It's this other part of you where you know you've made wrongs and you go to your companion and you say, listen, I was wrong. I am sorry. Now that is the superego part of you in place. Now, tragically, Freud had argued that the most dominant part of who and what we are really is this other part. The untamed, the ridiculous, the infantile, the childish. Now, how is superego created? The moment you are born, this infantile part of you is born with you. We don't need training for that. But this other part of you that you need to be ashamed and you need to repent, now that requires training. If you are religious, there are moments you catch yourself. If you've had good parents, moments where you transgress the teachings and the wisdom of your parents come back to haunt you. If you have seen your parents and if you enjoy their relationship and you yourself happen to be in a crummy one, once in a while, as the abuse continues in your own relationship, your memory stretches back and says, why can't I have a sort of a man that my mom has, like my father? That is a superego. You model yourself after those things that you perceive to be beautiful, to be embodiments of perfection. Why do we talk of Gilgamesh, of the Buddha, of Jesus, of Mahatma Gandhi? Because they are the superegos of the human race. They make us feel bad for the animals that we are. If you have ever written a really, really good essay, and you've inspired yourself, or you've written poetry, or you fell in love, and this part of you came out, where you sat by the phone for 5 hours, and then this person calls you. They were supposed to call you at 6, it's 11. You're enraged, but you hear their voice, and something about you softens. Love makes you more than human. And that experience is just burned inside you. Time passes. You're in a different relationship. And you say to yourself, I want to love this person the way I loved that person 20 years ago. Why do I shortchange myself? Let me dump his ass and move on. That's the superego. And the tragedy is every time you and I have an experience that overwhelms us, beautifies us, not only does it transform you, it also contaminates you. It reminds you that sometimes you're shortchanging yourself. If you've ever had a meaningful conversation that you really, really enjoyed, and then 10 minutes later, it devolved into gossip and just chit-chat, you say, really? I was just talking to Jesus Christ. Now I'm talking to Little Wayne. Freud had argued that he is like, I think, Da Vinci or Michelangelo or someone, that his ideas are like Michelangelo's painting, lots of darkness and little light. We suffer from 3 areas in life. There is no kingdom of God within us. There is no Buddha seed within us. None of us are made in the image of God. We are a mystery. Every single one of us in this room have a middle name. It's called X. We don't know what it is. We keep reading books about it. We keep listening to all these teachers on YouTube. We go to workshops to figure out who the hell we are. We can never discover ourselves. We are a mystery. We are a bundle of conflicting emotions and feelings and thoughts. We live in society. People we don't like. People we don't want to like. People we don't want to be around. Things we don't want to do. But if you want to stay in society, you're obligated to behave a certain way. Look, you're in this class. Some of you may not like me, and I don't blame you. Some of you may have had an exhausting day and you want to go home and maybe drink a beer and watch some porn. I don't blame you. But if you want a stupid grade, you are held hostage by a system that's far bigger than you are. That system will crush you until the time you die, and you have no power to overcome it. Society, not only does it benefit you and I in some ways, it also harms us. You're forced to do things you don't want to do. You're forced to become certain ways that you don't want to become. Why do we stay in relationships? Habit, addictions. You and I know full well that all things outlive their usefulness. There are shirts I don't wear, jackets I don't wear, shoes I don't wear. People I don't talk to, I still have their fucking number. Why? Because life is nothing but a force of imposition, and there is no escape from it. For those of you in this class who are in relationships, think back and be intellectually honest. You are with them really for one reason. You know how it started, right? Physical attraction. That's it. Let me say it more openly. You are sexually attracted to them. Let me say it more plainly. You just want to fuck them. A force imposed upon us by our own biology, and we have no power over it. And because of that particular passion, relationships are generated. Love is born. And then you slowly begin to watch it die. And yet you can't walk away. Because now the history, the psychological narratives, the attachments, the habits now impose themselves upon us. And there is no escape. Then there is the problem that some of us in this class have, which is you just get older. But you just don't really get older, do you? Your body begins to fail you. You still think you're 20, but you really aren't. You want to go home and do all sorts of things, but your body says no. It refuses to accompany you. You go after reading a book. I want to go home, look at my wife or my husband, and I'm going to perceive them differently because that's what the fucking book says. But you realize, no. Your body says no. I don't want to be around this person. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to look at them. How do you cope with a body that's failing you? Now, for Freud, human beings will do whatever they can to escape the realities of their life. How? After a long day's work and being completely wiped out by the forces of life, what do? Well, I go home and I get drunk. I go home and I smoke. And please don't raise hands saying, well, you know, weed is just like this organic thing. No. Don't be stupid. We smoke because we want to escape. Because life is too heavy. Life is too difficult. Life is too complex. We want to forget. We want to relax. If drinking and smoking are not what you do, maybe you'll read books so you can understand life a little bit better. Not because you can change it, to understand it. Not because you love life, and that's why you want to understand it. You want to understand life so you can cope better. I want to understand cancer, not because I know how to overcome it. Just in case there is pain, I know what fucking pills to take. It's a coping mechanism. Maybe I'll write. Maybe I'll paint. Maybe I'll do music. Maybe I'll go into teaching and teach philosophy and religious studies. Find a way out of this miserable thing called life. And for those of us who happen to be somewhat, I suppose, more intellectual, you'll go to the mother of all escapes, religion. Why do you have cancer? God wills it. What happened to your life? God wills it. I'm sure there is a mystery in it and some wisdom I'm supposed to get. If not today, hopefully tomorrow. Sigmund Freud eventually died from cancer of the jaw or cancer of the mouth at the age of 90-some. When he was 15 or 16, he tried cocaine a little bit only to realize it doesn't work. Cocaine doesn't help anyone. He worked at mental institutes and he tried to use cocaine with some of his patients because it was considered to be this magical drug, only to realize it's a band-aid and eventually it's going to come off. And all the ills that live inside some will eventually return, far worse. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he did take cocaine, but a very controlled amount because he wanted to continue writing. Despite all the awful things that Freud had said about art, about religion, Freud was a Jew. He made sure that his children practice Jewish laws. He had a collection, thousands of books on art. Now, all the things I've said from last night till tonight, just in case you feel exploited, alienated, lonely, sad, miserable, the thing you need to understand is that 700 years of work has gone into making us the way we are today. Go back to the movie Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault. Do you have any questions or comments before we...
Is there a restroom nearby?
Yeah, it's outside to your left.
Go outside?
Yeah, go outside and turn left. You'll see it. Yeah.
Do you recommend that book, Goodwill? I mean, the movie Goodwill Hunting?
Oh, it's a great movie, yeah.
Watch it here.
No. Yeah.
All of the classes.
This sad? Yeah. We're not going to have like happy class? This is happy. You don't like this happy? I wish I could give you happy thoughts, like happy feet, but my feet aren't happy. I can't dance for you. So we're stuck, you and I, unless you decide to drop. Yeah. Matt.
So before 13th century, it was just hunky-dory, everybody was
No.
lucky, they weren't as miserable as we are today.
No, before the 13th century, people knew how to suffer and how to suffer well. We don't know how to suffer well, and we don't know how to take pain well. If we did, the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't have so much power over us. If we did, we wouldn't have the rise of therapists. If we did, we wouldn't have the rise of depression and suicide. Suffering has always existed. Happiness has always been a very rare thing for anyone to have. I made a mistake, I think last night when I said happiness means It comes from the word hap, which means nowhere. The word hap means luck. You know, someone like Malcolm X can be happy. Happy in the sense that he looks at human misery and puts it to language. He comes on the stage and talks about human misery in a way that inspires me. Where I go home and I say, you know what? I want to change my life. You know. Viktor Frankl, who was held captive in the Nazi camp and wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning, he was held captive for many months, you know. And imagine every day you're facing your own death. It's not a happy place to be. He comes out and he writes a book. And what he says ultimately in the book is this: our shortage is no longer money. It's not wheat. It's not milk. It's not meat. What we don't really have is meaning, which he calls logotherapy. What we need is an environment where we can be therapeuticed, that someone can give us meaning, sell us meaning, train us in meaning. Okay? Now that's something that up to the 13th or 14th or 15th century, people didn't lack. Let me give you an example, may I? And I know that some of you in this class, many of you in this class can relate. My mom got married at the age of 15 and a half to my father who was 28. A couple hours later, I come out. There is no feminism in my mom. The culture tells her what she needs to do. She needs to get married. She's going to be a mother. She's going to be a housewife. End of story. That's it. She doesn't want to be a CEO. Does she have desires to go to school? Yeah, she did. But that's all she knew. That's all the culture exposed her to. That's all the desires and passions that the culture allowed her to have. Now, is it true that someone now, 2025, can be like my mom? No. There are too many desires. In the 1960s, we gave birth to condoms. Condoms equals now you can treat sex a bit more casually. Condoms equals now you can treat relationships a bit more casually. Those things didn't exist in my mother's time or your mother's time. So as people become more exposed to opportunities, you get more confusion. And because we're not the sort of animals that are intuitive and instinctive, what happens is you make decisions, then you come to regret those decisions, all because of the existing options. Now, let me just end my response in the following way. Your father had the power to slap you around a little bit, to make sure you don't cross any dangerous lines that could ruin your life and tarnish their reputation. If your father didn't have very much power over you, the church certainly did. If the church didn't, the Bible did. If the Bible didn't, your God did. In other words, for the longest time in our human history, there were people that you trusted. They had power over you. You couldn't claim to be an individual. It didn't exist. You couldn't make your own decision because your name had value. You got it from your dad. And the only way your dad can walk into town is because his last name has not been tarnished by you. Now, you're independent. You don't have to answer to anyone, which means you don't respect anyone, which means you make your own decisions. Based on what? What tiny little incompetent information you have. And what's the consequence? Mistakes. And because we're at an age where no one really has a relationship, just in case you fall, just in case you're in pain, just in case you're scarred and wounded, no one is willing to take care of you. Why? Because for people to take care of you, you need to be in relationships. You need to have created stories with them. And the only way you create stories is by spending time with them. But you don't have time. You work from 9 to 5. Then you take classes. Then you go home. You're far too exhausted to spend time, quality time. Not even quality time, any time, with anyone. We haven't even included technology to the scenario just yet. Now, every age has its own issues. But I doubt very much that they suffer from the depression that we suffered from. Are you still sad? Oh, I thought that was inspiring. What was your name? Yes. Serenity. Anyone else? Makai?
I have something, but.
Okay.
You read the book Animal Farm?
Animal Farm, yes. Probably not. I think the simplest way I can describe the book is the following. There is a passage in the Quran, which is the Bible of the Muslims. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Are you Muslim? The real kind? Oh, how would you know? Huh. Now, that there is this like message that's been sent to God. And in the Quran, this particular God's name is Allah. Do not ever test us, because we will fail. Animal Farm is about that. Animal Farm is about a tiny little animal who sees a lot of pain, who sees a lot of injustice, and says, I don't like what I see, and I don't like what's being done to my friends and to my people. And so they rise up and they destroy the culprit. But the very person, the lamb, who was supposed to be meek and innocent, right? Eventually he becomes a dragon. The message of the book ultimately really is, and for me at least, is that I don't know, I mean, none of us in this class know the sort of person we'll become when we are given a lot of power. You know, it's easy to say money is bad when you don't have very much of it. But when you have millions in your bank account and then you say money is bad, it means you've understood a few things about money and your spending power and what you spend it on. Nietzsche has a better story, but we'll save that for another day. But it's a good book. Anyone else? No one? Soraya. It's the name of a planet. Isn't it in Arabic?
You mentioned the Bible a couple of times. I was really happy to touch on it, but I just wanted to know, there's certain people that believe that the scriptures or the Bible itself was created for like a reason. Are you on that side or are you on this side?
So religion has, I think, 3 or 4 different faces or shades that you can use. Let's say you're sad and depressed like Serenity. You're gonna, let's say I'm your husband and as I'm walking home, I have a stroke and I die. You're gonna open the book and you're gonna come to the book of Job. And you're going to say to God, very much like what Job said to God, why me? Why it's happening? And you realize you're using the Bible for your personal usage. It's to figure out why your life has turned out this way. You want answers. You want to know what you're going to do as a single woman now, as a widow now. You want to understand why I'm dead. You want to understand what you need to do with your kids now. It's just for you, okay? Let's say now you drive home and you see these cops beating up this tiny little kid. And again, you open the Bible and you say, inside every human being lives the image of God. An eye for an eye. So you park your car, you come out with a baseball bat, and you beat the crap out of these police officers. Okay. And the point I suppose I'm trying to make is the following. Depending on where you are in life, depending on your temperament, you can use the Bible as your own therapist. You could use the Bible as the sociological part of you. You can use the Bible as a political part of you. You can use the Bible as a spiritual part of you. That your life is really, really good, okay? But for some strange reason, it feels empty and cheap and hollow. And you say, you know what? Jesus felt the same way. At the age of 12, he just left everyone and everything, went to the desert. I feel like doing that. So the Bible is like Costco. The more versed you are, the more mature you are, the more you're endowed with perspectives, the more you take to it, the more you can take out. I mean, look, we've had KKK clan members who argue that when God creates man, it's the white man. And they've used that philosophy to kind of demonize the rest of us. So, yeah. Anyone else? Nothing? Serenity. I'm sorry? Tired of you? Your serenity.
What if our church is
It's on Canvas.
right? So what if like I really didn't-
You click on Canvas.
I did that like you know,
So there is a video you watch or you listen to, and then you click on the essay, you look at the guidelines, the questions, and you just write something. And make sure you approach it with a good amount of serenity. Anyone else?
What did you do?
Sunday, God's day.
No, because I wasn't here the first day.
Yeah, Sunday. Yeah. Yes, Mikai.
So, are we not doing enough, or are we doing too much of the wrong?
What the hell are you talking about?
An idea, you mentioned a lot of your requests, which I think is certainly, and I think that, well, there's a saying that I think works is that how people get out of depression is to get active. And so I believe in this saying is.
May I? Thank you. So, number one, a good amount of who and what you are depends on the culture in which you live. Let me give you a couple of examples. In certain parts of the Middle East, when there is sandstorm, in certain parts of Alaska, when there is snowstorm, when the storm is really, really heavy and it's just blinding, what oftentimes happens is people who are walking and all of a sudden the storm hits, they sit. They don't move. They sit and wait for the storm to die. And they've examined their heartbeats, they've examined their mental wirings, and they come to realize they have an enormous amount of patience. They don't get frustrated. They're not unhappy. They're not jittery. And it's all because that's the way the culture trains them. Okay? What makes this interesting is you need to now ask yourself, where does frustration come about and why? How is it related to your society, to your culture, to your upbringing? Another example is there are certain parts of Alaska where there are nomads, the Inuits, you know, and as the seasons change and as the food diminishes, people have to move. Now, in the nomadic environments, mothers usually nurse their kids anywhere from 3 to 6 years. And a woman has only so much milk in her breast to give. Now imagine she's got like 2 or 3 or 4 kids. There comes a point where there is this infant, she wants milk, but there is no milk. You know what they do? They leave the kid in the snow to die. Sometimes they leave their older parents in the snow to die. There is no guilt, there is no shame, there is no repentance, there is no remorse, there is no praying to the gods, asking for forgiveness. None of those things exist. Okay? Now the flip side. You turn on the TV and there is Beyonce. She's driving this beautiful Mercedes Benz. And she's driving down the hill topless. Not topless here, just topless. Okay? Or maybe topless here too. Maybe it's your lucky day. All right? And she's driving down this hill. To her right, there's the ocean. To her left, there is Yosemite. And her hair, you know. And then just before this advertisement ends, it says, "This is happiness." Now, you love Beyonce. She has a great voice. Jay-Z, I'm not really quite sure, but nevertheless. Okay? So you know what you do? You go to In-N-Out, put in an application, you get called, you get a job. For the next 20 years, you slave away and you save your money. Then you go to Mercedes-Benz Oakland and you buy yourself a Mercedes-Benz. Now you live in Hayward. And you're doing it for one reason, Beyonce. She told you what happiness is. So you get in the car, 7:45 a.m., you want to get to Laney. You look to your left, concrete. You look to your right, concrete. You look behind you, traffic. You look in front of you, traffic. So, what the hell is this? Where's the ocean? And you can't even go topless. And what you realize is that the culture sells you emotions, sells you advertisements, which create their own set of emotions. Now, having said all of those things, let me just say a couple of things about depression. Life has one function. Life creates. For you and I, life creates events. Events. Shit happens. Whether you want to or not, shit walks into your life. What do you do with it? Well, you experience it. What do you do with the experience? You interpret it. You interpret the experience. The shittier your culture, the shittier your interpretation of the experience. James Baldwin, another gifted human being. He had argued that if someone was to call me the N-word, I'm going to look at them. I'm going to say, what the hell is wrong with that person? I have a name, my name is James. Why would this person use the N-word towards me? Ah, I know why. They're sick. And you know what I should do? I'm going to look at them. Say, listen, you look thirsty. Why don't you and I go to Pete's coffee shop? I'll buy you a latte, maybe a mocha, and a slice of banana bread. You and I will sit and talk. Shit happens, it's interpreted, and he takes action. The flip side, Mike Tyson, when he was younger, not now. You call him the N-word, your life has come to an end. Now, there are degrees that the events touch you in life. Okay? Now, to give you an example, you and I just met. If you come to this class on Monday, and instead of me stands my dean, And my dean looks at you and says, and you ask, sorry, where is Amir? And she looks at you and says, sorry, Mackay, Amir dead. Dead? How dead? Very dead. Like 6 feet under dead. You say, oh man, I really liked him. I was going to ask him out on a date. You sure he dead? Yeah, he dead. He come back to life? No, he dead. And then you're going to bow your head a little bit. You're going to be a little sad. And then your hand will go up again. So, is the class canceled? That's it? That's how long you're going to be sad for? Just a second? And the dean will say, no, I think by tomorrow we'll have another instructor. Now imagine if I was your brother. And imagine that you and I really liked each other. And we've been together for about like 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And we are tight, man. And as you and I are watching TV, I collapse to the ground and I die. Now, I'm dead, but this is other scenario, I too am dead. But in this scenario, you and I have only 3 days of a relationship. In the other one, you have 20 years. You will feel grief for me as your instructor for maybe 5 seconds. As your brother, you may never recover. You have no choice in life to be given a set of experiences that are positive and a set of experiences that are negative, i.e. sad. Okay? Some of the sad experiences will agitate you a little bit, frustrate you a little bit. Eventually you'll forget. Some will stay with you for a while and you'll think about them. Some will stay with you longer. Not only will you think, but you also feel about them. Some are chronic. Chronic depression or chronic anything. It means it lives inside your soul. Now, if there is anything chronic about you, it's not going to come out. Go back to Charles Darwin. Memories are living organisms. And all living organisms have one function: to make sure they stay alive. Chronic depression means that you think about certain things, about yourself, about life, one way. Things are always bad. I am no good. Life sucks. No one's ever going to like me. I'm never going to get out of this. And as you keep replaying this tape, that becomes an addiction, a habit. And habits are very, very, very difficult to overcome. If they have become chronic, they're not going to come out at all. It's impossible. Unless you have an army of people helping you. So when you speak about depression, a couple of things you need to understand. Whether you're African or African American, life is going to offer you stuff. Okay? If you live in a culture that gives you lots of tools, when bad things happen, the culture automatically kicks in and tells you what to do. If you live in a culture that doesn't give you the proper tools, you wouldn't know what to do when bad things happen. In a culture that has depth, you have a support system. If you're incompetent, your support system will take care of the experience that's crushed you. If you live in a culture that's not very communal like here, if bad things happen, you got to do it on your own. And because you don't have the sufficient tools, you will falter. And when you try again and again and you fail again and again, what you realize, something happens to your self-image and your self-confidence. And if this happens over in different areas of life, now you have chronic depression. Now, if you have chronic depression, it means that once a week you can come out and see the sun for 5 seconds. The rest of the time, you're home, in your room, blinds shut, lights are off. Now I'm not talking about a physical space, it could be mental. Young cultures don't really have much to offer. It takes a long, long time. I mean, there is a reason why Egypt is about 5,000, Iran is about, Persia is about 5,000, Africa is about 5,000. They've gone through a lot of stuff. And when you go through a lot of stuff, you create stories. How the hell do I cope with this? And if you live in a culture that's young and doesn't have the proper stories, well, it has nothing to give you. If you're able to find ways to change the way you interpret certain experiences, that can be your Messiah. Anyone else? Elijah.
Do you feel like Americans are too close-minded?
No. I think it's very true that look, Africa is like a 90-year-old man. America is like a 5-year-old, young boy. And what is it that 5-year-olds want? 5-year-olds are curious. 5-year-olds want to experience. 5-year-olds want to know. Americans want to know. Americans want to experience. The only problem is when you're young, you don't have the proper experiences. You don't have enough. And you don't have the right stories. You know? I think Americans are really, really good because they're hungry. And that's the position of all things that are young. Right? But if you're young and hungry and all you have are chips, well, shit, you're going to have all these health issues. If you're hungry and you have a Costco, that's a different story. Africa is like a Costco. The Middle East is like a Costco. India is like a Costco. China is like a Costco. America doesn't have any things. What America does is it appropriates. It takes things from here and there. The tragedy is young people, young cultures always take the wrong things. A good thief breaks into your house, goes where the gold is. A novice thief goes into your freezer and grabs a popsicle. And young cultures create trash. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, the culture did not create people like Little Wayne. It couldn't digest people like Little Wayne. You don't create people like that. You know, so something must have happened to any culture where you have a lot of trash around, and then that trash is considered to be profoundly valuable. What time is it? You have half hour. Well, 20 minutes. Anyone else? Stephanie, Joanne, E. Yes.
Do you identify as a nihilist?
As a nihilist. Have you ever been in a relationship? Have you ever walked away from the relationship? Is it because you just no longer saw anything in it? Did that make you a nihilist? Of course it did. What is nihilism? Let's just say in something as simple as a relationship. I mean, you're with a person, We could say a person has infinite possibilities and capacities, right? But you spend time with them, and like a leech, you know what a leech is? It gets stuck on your skin, sucks the blood out of you, okay? So that's what we do in relationships. We stick to a person and we suck everything that they have. And after 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe a year or two, you realize they no longer have anything to offer you. And you say, I'm breaking up with you. And the person may say, but I'm a human being. I was born, made in the image of God. I have all these things. I say, no, I don't see anything in you anymore. I'm done. The idea of nihilism, for me, the way I look at it is the following. You live with something and you're very intimate with it. You understand it really, really well. Really, really well. And then you say, I know what this thing is inside and out. I no longer want to be around it. Let me give you an example. There is this great book that came out. Have you read it? That's right. It's called The Gospel of Judas. The Gospel of Judas is defined around 2000, year 2000. It's one of those fascinating books, you know, where, like Socrates, like Malcolm X, he goes to one of his disciples, namely Judas, and says, listen, I think I'm done down here. I've hung out with the Jews and I've come to realize they're no good. I've had conversations with people only to realize that that's no good either. And, you know, yeah, you disciples, you're not bad, but, you know, you guys are completely useless too. And life really doesn't have much to offer me. You know, I'm not so much about sex. I'm not so much about money. I don't want to overthrow the government. All I want to do is to teach, but I'm really no longer interested in teaching. So Judas, can you do me a favor? Yes, I'll do whatever you say. Can you give me to the Romans? What? Yeah, just hand me over to the Romans. Why? I'd rather die. But you're Jesus. So what? I want to go back home. But how about down here? You know what? I don't really give a shit. You guys take care of it. I'm done. Is he a nihilist? Yeah. Is he a good nihilist? Yeah. Is he an educated nihilist? Yes. Is he a mature nihilist? Yes. Now, this is a man who's depressed for all the right reasons. That's a good depression to have. He has tried things 1,000 times and came to the conclusion it doesn't go anywhere. And if my job is done, why do I want to stick around? One of the things you'll discover about cancer patients is, and it happens to all of us, that as a human being, you're an engaged animal. You fight to survive. That's the principle of life. At a certain point, you realize that the cancer is just, it's far too long. Stage 4, it's everywhere. Now, people around you, because we don't really understand death too well, and we can't really let people go with serenity too well, we hang on to them and we make them feel bad for desiring to just die. So you know what cancer patients do? After a while, they simply refuse to eat. They starve to death. Are they nihilists? Yeah. Why? They wrestled, they fought, a good fight. Eventually they realized it's not a fight they're going to win. Is the pain worth? No, it's not worth it. Nihilism is really, really, really good if you know how to use it. Anyone else? Do you have like 10 minutes? Andrew?
about capitalism. I forget who said it, but do you think that it's easier to conceptualize the end of the world than the end of capitalism?
I don't know about those things. I think if there is any system out there that you're involved with but you don't like, it's very difficult to remove yourself from that particular sphere all by yourself. So, forgive me for indulging this a little bit. So there is Yaning, there is Kendra, and there is Abi, and of course there is you. The four people in this room, you were students many years ago. Now you guys are off. You have your own teaching positions. You're teaching your classes much better than I ever could. One of the things I came to realize is that good job. One of the things that I came to realize that if you're infected by the passion for philosophy, by the passion for thinking, you're going to be forced into isolation. In other words, you're going to think deeply about things. And when you think about things, pressure gets built inside you. Emotions gets built. You begin to have thoughts. And you need to talk about these things to people. The idea that I can do it on my own, it doesn't work that way. Okay? I've been in this business for a long time. Before being a teacher, I was a good student for a long time. Okay? So what I realize is the four of you guys, since these ideas are going to damage you, why don't the four of you get together often, have food together, break bread together, and once in a while talk about this stuff. Now, what happens now, it is true that you live in a capitalistic system, but what you've done, you've kind of carved out a branch out of capitalism. The four of you go to In-N-Out or somewhere quiet, you make food together, you sit together. Sometimes your conversations are light, sometimes it's heavy. But also know that's not going to be enough. Because after a while, what happens to all relationships is that they get old. But you also need to do another thing. You need to speak about the stuff that live inside you. How do you do it? Well, you don't want to go to a therapist shop. What you want to do is you want to get your master's degree in humanities and philosophy. And you better pray to God that I'm still alive so I can find ways for you to start teaching. Once that happens, now it'll benefit you in several ways. First, you'll fall in love with books. That's how initially it starts. Now, when you sit and you read books, it means that you can actually tolerate being alone. And you are alone doing things that benefit you and give you pleasure, which is you read. And then sometimes you write. And then sometimes you walk and think and feel. Okay? So now you walk into life. You are alone, but you've been trained. For the past 2 years, you've sat in your room and just read. Now, one of the things about reading is that it's like a weed whacker. The people who don't enjoy reading and thinking and feeling about things the way you do, you don't want to be around them. Now, one of the things that this does is that it automatically isolates you. It pushes other people away. Now, you want to mingle with other people, but you can't because the ideas won't allow you to do that. There is this beautiful verse in the Gospel of Luke where he says, I want you guys go away, go to various towns and give them the gospel. And just in case they are mean-spirited, shake the dust off of your feet and leave that town immediately. If you have been touched by something profound, if you've ever had sex with love, the moment you realize someone just wants your body but not your emotions, something about you says, no, I don't want to do this right now. And you just walk away. Now, as you become more mature, your circle begins to shrink. Now, human beings are social animals. Just because you love philosophy, it doesn't mean it needs to be miserable. So what happens is now you begin to mingle with other people. Now, once you get your master's, now you have power. What do you do with this power? You walk into the classroom. Now, that is when your salt will come out. You're going to open your mouth and you're going to say, okay, am I animated? Am I dry? Am I warm? Am I hot? Do I inspire? Am I just spitting out information? So what you have is, the only way you can overthrow capitalism is for you to create your own unique circle of friends, like-minded people. Smokers have their own friends, foreigners have their own friends, philosophers have their own friends. That's your salvation. There is no other path. When people go to AA centers, all the AA members become their friends. That's the support system. We don't want to go out and be around the old friends who smoke and drink all the time, because you're going to go back to the old. I didn't understand your question properly, perhaps. Anyone else before we go home? Avi? Oh, they're none. I think because young cultures have such intense energy about them, the only people who are able to use this young energy in a relatively beneficial way are older people. Someone who has a lot of money, but they happen to be young and stupid, they're going to burn it. Someone who has a lot of money, but they're older, and they know that this money came from their own blood and sweat, and how difficult it is and how valuable it is, they're going to be much more of a Scrooge, if you will. And that's what happens whenever you can be 18, you can fall in love, you can be burnt by love, you're 20 now, and it is true that it's painful that you invested so much and you got so little. But the outcome, if you're able to overcome the anger that lives inside you, is that now you walk back into the dating scene at the age of 20, 21, you're wiser for it. You begin to say, the person I'm dating today kind of resembles my ex, they're no good. Okay. So when you speak about just someone being old, someone can be old chronologically, like I'm 62. Okay? Someone can be old because they have learned from their experiences, they've observed, they've understood, and they go back into life. And they can be 5. I mean, not 5 really, but they can be like 25. Yeah. Well, as you know, today is Wednesday. We have no class tomorrow. See you Monday. Stay in touch. Take care. Have a nice weekend. Stay safe. It's good to see all of you.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. It's all good. You're fine.